Hello, everybody, and today is a treat. I am joined by two experts in compliance and legal topics. And the topic of today is an upcoming EU directive about product liability. All right. Are you scared of the liability that your company is running when selling products in the European Union? You should probably be more scared when you look at this upcoming, let's say, revision of the current directive. And by the way, it might end up being a regulation. We're not sure. But anyway, let's not split hair. When you look at the revision of this directive, you will probably be much more scared. And that's what we're going to cover today. So the two guests we have today are, so a lot of people who've been listening to the podcast know about Clive Greenwood, who is now a compliance counsel at Liangma Law Firm. Okay, it's a law firm based in Shenzhen, China. Clive is originally from the UK. He's been on this podcast, as I said, a number of times, and he has more than 30 years of quality assurance and compliance experience, a lot of that in China, with a special focus on European Union compliance laws. And this is a first. Clive also got Professor Simon Choi, one of his colleagues, a partner at Liangma Law Firm, to join. So Professor Choi has more than 30 years of international management experience. He's a senior lawyer in Hong Kong and in the United Kingdom. He graduated from Peking University, University College London, and the University of Hong Kong Law School. He serves as an independent director of many listed companies and has extensive legal education and practical experience around the world. He once served as the global legal director of TCL. So for people who don't know, that's one of the largest Chinese manufacturers and exporters of, mostly electrical products. And he led TCL towards internationalizations for nearly 10 years. So an amazing amount of experience in international law. In 2013, he was also appointed as a co-professor of the School of Law at Zhongnan University of Economics and Law. So that's why we're calling him Professor of Law. So we're in very good hands today to cover this topic. So again, just to reiterate what I mentioned, there's a proposal by the European Union Commission, which will very certainly come into force around maybe March to June of next year, with a period of grace, of a transition of only 12 months. So this will be fully in effect, let's say, from mid-2025, okay? And you better be aware of all the implications of this revision of the directive, and we're going to explain why, if you sell products in the European Union. So there's two very interesting topics to explore, okay, in this proposed revision of the directive. The first topic is who is liable. And this is changing things quite a bit, okay? The key concept, maybe Clive, you can give us a little rundown on this and how you read it, but the key concept is that to protect consumers adequately, there's got to be someone in the EU who is liable, right? And that doesn't mean only a company. That could also be personally a director or CEO or legal representative of the company, right? So how do you see this impacting the different parties, let's say, in the supply chain of products sold in the EU?
Okay, well, hello everybody. Thank you, Renaud, for having us on again, and again, welcome, Professor Choi. Lovely to see you here on these podcasts. I hope you are going to enjoy this. Right, so good introduction, Renaud. Let's first of all look at where this is. It is a decision 1926-2006 EC Consumer Protection Law, which is being upgraded. So the regulation EU 254/2014 is the additional law which comes in, and it's basically looking at four main areas. First is transparency in the product manufacturing process. Secondly, consumer identification of the source of the product. 3, the environmental risk relating to the product, and 4, the ability of the consumer to take direct action related to product liability.
So this is the high level context. Let's say the intent of the regulators here, right? And your point number
right.
4 is particularly important here. That's the one I wanted to cover most. Yes.
Right. Okay. As we know that for many years, if a product has had a CE mark, then the requirement has been that there should be an EU representative who would hold the technical file and the ability to be contacted in the needs of a product recall. This regulation now does not require the CE. It's all products. The current draft
products.
is all products. So the reason that they've saying this is very clear in the draft so far. That the regulatory authorities shall have the means and ability to prosecute a person in the EU, which is exactly as it was before when there was the CE representative. Now you've got to think about this as all your products.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no distinction in the supply chain between the manufacturer, the exporter, the importer, the distributor, or the retailer. Any one of these people can be held jointly or severally liable for product liability claims.
So let's explore what that means for the different types of parties. Maybe first, Clive, we can talk about let's say the distributor side and the importer side, and then we can get to the other side, which is, for example, in the case of a producer in China and maybe a trading company in China or Hong Kong. We can look into that with Professor Choi right after. But what does that change? For example, for the distributor, okay, what they call distributor as an economic operator is, let's say, a retailer, for example. What does that change?
That's right. Okay, you remember we've spoken before about the product passport and the transparency requirements for that. Those transparency requirements are enshrined within this act as well. So what we're looking at here is the traceability of the product from the manufacturer all the way through to the end customer. And any person, irrespective of how little or how much they were involved, are equally and severally liable.
All the parties in the supply chain. Yeah.
But irrespective of how much. Okay? Irrespective of how much. Now, there's some numbers being bandied around that, it will be a percentage and tended to be percentaged out. But the regulation that's wrote at the moment is the objective of the Consumer Protection Act in its current form has been proven to undermine the possibility to limit or exclude the economic operator's liability through contractual provisions.
Yes, that's a very big one right here.
That's a very big one.
And so
that
typically in
now
typical
not
practice,
possible.
Right. So in typical practice, if I'm Tesco or Carrefour or one of the retailers and I buy a product, or Amazon, I buy a product from typically maybe a wholesaler, an importer, or maybe I import directly, my contract would always transfer all the liability back to my supplier, right? And now what you're saying is that this is no longer possible.
Well, the words are, okay, therefore no contractual derogation shall be permitted.
Right. So what does that mean in terms of the retailer's willingness to carry certain products on their shelves, especially the product categories that might come with some hazards, like electrical products, kids products, things like that?
Well, for the same reason, it should be noted, right, that the wording is it should not be possible for provisions of national law to limit or exclude liability, and such financial ceilings on the economic ability are unlimited.
Right. So that should scare the retailers,
The
right?
living that should scare the living pants off the retailers, yeah.
Right. So what are
So,
they going to do likely?
well, I think that the big question here would be to find somebody from the product liability insurance people and ask them that question.
Right. But as you and I know, it's not really an adequate answer. There's a lot of ways for them to say that claims don't cannot be accepted and processed, right? So it's never going to
Yeah,
be the solution.
yes, but also here's the thing. Within the provision as well of Article 2, if you have not done due diligence, and due diligence, they talk about the digital file, which we've spoke about before, right? If you
Technical
have not
file.
done that,
Mhm.
the technical file, yeah. If you have not done the due diligence and can provide that information on the technical file and it does go to court in Europe, the product will be deemed as defective.
Wait, this is topic two. So let's let's stay
Yeah,
on
but
topic one.
it falls into topic one as well, because
Yes.
who is responsible for that? And the answer is everyone within the buying chain.
Right. Yeah. So
Okay.
everybody in the
So that's
chain
why it goes
is
above.
liable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So distributors are likely, I mean, that's the way I see it. They will beef up their own due diligence and they will manage compliance much more tightly. And when they see there's still a risk, they will just discontinue certain types of products. I mean, we've already seen Amazon do that. So that's going to be a change. There's going to be much more requirement for the importers and for the trading companies that want to be listed on brick and mortar retail shops, but also e-commerce platforms, right? Because everybody in there
Yeah.
is going to be at risk of being sued, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole thing, which seems to read into both the labeling law and the product liability law, everything seems to be migrating towards the central topic which we first started with, which was the actual integrated product passport and transparency throughout the process. Professor Choi, what do you say?
For me, actually, say is that risks actually say explode from the procurement of materials and the manufacturer, and then say the carrier, importer, and also for the distributor, retailer, and then to end user. You should tie
Mhm.
up all the parties together. It means that who is in default should be identified. However, that the law will not say saying that who will be liable for that. The law allows people to sue all the parties, and then say eventually who have to pay the compensation or have to reimburse the damages. Am I right? How to find them out and how to enforce them? That is the question. For me, I don't think, all right, because of directives coming out and it enforced, and then no platform selling that kind of category of the goods. I don't think so because people will buy it. There's a need. No matter online or offline, there are always people buying the products. But how to manage the risk is important. Legally speaking, is that
Mm.
management of risk is important.
The EU is setting up the regional compliance centres, which is part of I believe it was 4.5 billion euro setup that the EU Commission allocated towards the whole Green Deal and everything. So the aspect of that this should be policed by the consumer, I think, is starting to take shape. And the burden of proof, which Professor Choi is talking about here, the burden of proof exposes all the economic players equally.
Because all the parties
You,
involved in this should be
yes,
potential risks. The
that's
best thing
right.
that we can do is apply the blockchain technology to make everything from the origin, procurement of material, manufacturing process, and then finished goods, carrier, goods in transit, importer, and then the warehouse, and then go to the distribution channel, and then to retailer, and then to who is the end customer, all recorded by blockchain technology. So they say when something happened that we can trace back using the blockchain technology to find out who is in default. Because the blockchain technology is recorded there, is a public record. No one can erase it. No one can alter it. That is the point. And in the past, right, what we're saying is that it's a declaration. It means I declare that all my materials are in compliance with AU directive, finish. And then
No.
but nowadays
No,
not,
no, no,
sorry.
no, not now.
Nowadays not.
Now operating a simple declaration, which was the way in the past, it's been replaced by the technical file.
Yes.
You can say it, but you must prove it.
So the who prove it? So they say you need an auditing company to do the legal compliances to certify that all the process in complying with the rules and regulations of EU legislation. And
exactly.
then trying to make sure that it's a burden of proof that anyone, all right, who going to compose, say, a passport, shall have the kind of, say, burdens to show that we have complied with it.
Exactly.
So these are non-legal approaches that Professor Choi actually is suggesting, using blockchain technology to collect evidence of who's been involved along the chain and some information with it, and also as just what you mentioned just now. Yeah, that makes sense. One question, just to come back to what we were discussing just before, is okay, all of the actors here are liable if there is some damage to goods, to property, or to people, right? If there's a claim and somebody is sued and they can sue different party in the chain. Okay, how about, for example, the importer purchased products from a factory located, say, in Guangzhou, in China. So what I hear is that according to this upcoming, let's say, piece of legislation from the EU, the Chinese factory cannot hide behind a contract that says, I'm not liable, right? If we just look at the EU legislation, it's also possible to ask them for compensation. However, on the ground, and this is I'm very happy to have you here and to be able to ask you this question. On the ground, in terms of actually collecting money, right? What can the importer do to collect money from the producer in Guangzhou? Is there a way? Because a lot of people listening to us, watching this video, they believe, because they've heard it many times, like there's no way. The Chinese party, once they have shipped the goods, they get paid, that's it. You cannot go back to them, right? Is this true? What would you suggest?
So my experience that a lot of the inexperienced importer who import goods from China, they use a very simple contract. They fail to draft all the application properly. That's the reason why they cannot recover the loss from the Chinese manufacturer or exporter. The things that actually we can do very well. Number one, we have the adequately drafted agreement, making that they're liable. And then number one, we have to understand that, a foreign judgment by a EU court, for example, in Belgium or in France, is not enforceable in China. A Chinese court will not enforce a foreign judgment unless there is some connection that are tied to. But obviously, it's not really possible at the moment. The one thing, all right, we can break through this kind of barrier is we can have arbitration, international arbitration. We remember that, number one, China is a signatory country of the New York Convention. It means that if the parties specify arbitration in a third-party country or his home country, there will be a better chance, all right? Because when we have the arbitration hours, we can enforce in China because China is actually a signing country that ratified the convention. That's the way that we protect our interests as an importer or retailers in Europe. That's the concept.
Okay.
We can specify, number one, you can use your home country law as a governing law, or you can use another country, but you have to specify that, you use an international arbitration center in somewhere else, maybe Hong Kong, maybe in Singapore, Belgium, Sweden, Paris, London, all right, any place. Because actually, at the time of negotiation contract, the Chinese manufacturer are very willing to open for a third-party governing law, international arbitration. That is a way that we can protect ourselves in case of any dispute that we suffer loss and how to recover from the Chinese exporter or manufacturer. That's the method.
All right. So if I summarize, number one is to have a proper contract, well written. Number two is to have the contract call for arbitration in a country that is part of the New York Convention, right? That is a signatory in one of these countries. And then if you have these two things and the contract is well written, then let's say the importer, for example, can go back to his supplier, for example, a producing factory in Guangzhou, go after them in arbitration as per the contract. And should the contract actually mention that they are responsible for all the damages and non-compliance to EU law?
Number one, actually, say we make sure that the party intend to export the goods item into EU country.
Yes.
Therefore, it means that they have to comply with the local law in EU. Am I right? It's very important that you comply with the final sales, the destination of final sales, where the end consumer use is important. They must have to comply with that kind of law. Otherwise, why you sell something that's an infringement of law or unsafe products? It's meaningless. All right. So they say, we need a couple of well-drafted clauses in the contract. We need, say, a governing law, which is a Chinese party may be likely to accept it and go to a third-party arbitration place, which is a China, a signing country of the New York Convention, all right, for the enforcement of arbitration hours. I think that will be a fantastic way to protect this. If you are an EU importer or seller, retailer.
Or even if you are an American company, develop your product, actually you're selling it in the EU, US, Canada, and then you start to sell it also in the EU, then you can also have your contract specify that. And then if you're liable in the EU, then you can go back. Right.
Because actually a lot of buyers like New York, say a lot of US buyers, they specify New York state law, New York City to exclude jurisdiction, but in the end, it's an empty judgment. You cannot enforce it in China.
If they call for litigation, you mean? If they call for litigation.
If you go to litigation, all right, the same thing happened in the EU. If you do, say, an EU country law like Hungary, and having, say, a litigation in Hungary, all right, and then, all right, you got the judgment. You cannot enforce it. That's a problem.
Yeah, a big problem.
Just to sort of like wrap that one up, actually, I'm looking at Article 2, Section C, Objective 3 of the Act. And what Professor Choi is saying here is actually covered here. It says the rights and addresses to develop and reinforce consumer rights in the particular through smart regulatory action and to improve access through simple, effective, expedient and low-cost redress, including alternative dispute resolution.
The ADR actually is a method, yes. ADR, but
that's the actual words there. Yeah.
The ADR is a method, alternative dispute resolution is a new concept, but actually it's not very well recognized globally yet. I really think that say arbitration is still the best way. Number one is private. Number two, more efficient. Number three, you have, say, a convention, all right, to make the Chinese parties to be enforceable so that you have very certain. We need certainty as a lawyer.
Oh, yes. Especially with this kind of piece of regulation that's going to come into place. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that's great. I think we clarified this very nicely, and it's whether people are working for a retailer, for an importer, for maybe a trading company or a manufacturer. Okay, things are, I think, much clearer. Let's get to the second topic, the second concept that we are reading in this new proposal for a new directive is that the burden of proof. So usually in let's say in Europe in general, and in the US, usually if I say that you did something wrong, I need to bring some proof that you did something wrong, right? I know in China it's a bit different.
Same thing. Same.
Right. But
In China, it's not different, actually.
yes. Now the EU is actually getting a little bit closer to the Chinese logic. The EU says, wait a minute, consumers, it's just someone maybe sitting in their home, like they don't have access, they should not have to call a lawyer, they should not have to collect evidence. Something bad happened, there's been a damage. This proposal says that they have the right to request information. And the burden of proof relies on the suppliers, on the seller's shoulders, okay, on the distributor, the importer, etc., etc. And if the seller does not provide evidence that the product is safe, that the product is fully compliant, and so on and so forth, that they tested it according to these technical standards, and so on and so forth, if they don't provide this evidence, the product is presumed to be defective. These are the words, and I see Clive is nodding his head, right? These are the words from the proposal, right? And this is very strong wording, I feel.
Yeah, let's have a look at what it actually says here. And this is all preemptive action. It says, before placing the product on the market, the manufacturer shall ensure manufacturers carried out an appropriate conformity assessment. If the product has been placed on the market, corrective actions should be taken such as to bring the product into compliance. The manufacturer shall draw up a technical documentation and affix the relevant labels and marking, including, an example, a CE marking, and fulfill their traceability obligations. The manufacturer's contact information, the display of the type, batch, serial number, and product identifying number. The product is accompanied by the relevant instructions and safety instructions, if required, in a language easily understood by the consumer and other end users according to the rules of the EU country to which it is being imported.
And just as a note for the listeners who may not be familiar with that, in the EU, when they say the manufacturer, they mean the company that puts their logo and their brand name and everything on the product. If there's no mention that the manufacturing company is this company in Shenzhen, blah, 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 then by default, the importer who brought the products on the market and put their brand and everything on the product, or the brand, or maybe the brand company, which might not be the importer, they are the quote unquote manufacturer, right? So
there is a section which allows for that to happen, which is that if the manufacturer is unknown, then the last point of contact in the packaging information shall be deemed liable, which is exactly what you just said.
Yeah. Somebody's going to be on the hook.
Yeah. The other side of this one is it also, by looking at objective one, which is safety, they are actually now trying to coordinate. Very much remember when we talked about medical products, we were talking about the market surveillance that you needed to do to maintain the product. They've actually brought this into liabilities here. So the coordination of market surveillance and informant actions on product safety with regards to Directive 201/97 EC shall improve customer accountability enforceability.
So in a nutshell,
your product labeling. Yeah.
Yes, they're really tightening things up. They're making things more obvious. So it's very clear. It's much easier, let's say, for any party, such as a consumer, to bring a case in front of a court somewhere in the EU, start the process, and get somebody involved. Right? So they can find someone to sue, basically.
Yeah. If you remember, when I said that they were actually going to have all of these compliance centres set up in various EU cities. Okay. Basically, the way that I read this, that you would be able to actually either use an NGO, report it to an NGO, or you would be able to go to yourself, like the Consumer Protection Society that is in the UK, for example. They will then demand access to the technical file. Failure to provide that technical file is an admission of that the product is defective.
And just to clarify also, the technical file or technical dossier or whatever it's called will include the information about the producer, will include the bill of material, the drawings and other information about the product itself, and of course the test reports and factory certifications or audit reports, risk assessment about the product, and declaration of conformity. That's going to be required also because of the new general product safety regulation coming into play next year. So all of that is going to have to be in a technical file, right? So there's a lot of information they can get their hands on, and they can really dig deep into it and see if maybe somebody forgot something.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the existing PLD, which is the original directive of where consumer protection, health and safety all starts to come into one aspect of this. So the PLD needs to ensure consumer protection if defective products brought directly from a non-EU countries, such damage where there is no EU-based manufacturer or importer. That, to me, again, is coming back to the idea of online shopping, where there is no direct person. Now we know that the digital platforms have been covered by a separate EU regulation. Okay, but what I'm reading here is as soon as you put that onto a shop shelf, you are now liable.
Oh yeah,
equally as the manufacturer.
Right, jointly and severally, right?
Jointly and severally.
So one question, and we discussed this a bit before recording this, is how, and maybe Professor Choi can share his idea on this. That means there's going to be much more pressure on the producers, and in China there's a lot of producers who develop the products and say, this is my product, I will not tell you how it's made, I will not give you the bill of material, I will not give you all of this. It will put a lot of pressure on them, number one, to do things as per the rules and actually constitute the technical file the proper way, etc. And number two, to actually share it every time it's going to be requested, right? How is this going to fly with Chinese producers? Do you think there's going to be a lot of resistance?
For me, it's actually say, for all the businessmen, do you want the business? Is it necessary that you do it? If yes, comply with, sorry. And then there will be a balance between what's about confidentiality and disclosable, right? What used to be disclosed will become public information. What should not be disclosed becomes still remain confidential, right? That is the concept. They have to strike the balance between what to be disclosed, what to be disclosed. This is important. I want to go back to one thing about the directive, right? Itself. Number one, we say that usually for people that want to sue anybody, the burden of proof is the party who make the complaint. However, under a statute, a piece of law, right, legislation, we call it strict liability. It means the law say that who has the burden to prove, not traditionally say the claimant to prove it. Under the kind of safety law, right, the burden of proof should be the party who bring the product to EU. Therefore, they have a lot of duty to prove that they are prudent. So they say this is in favor of consumer because consumer are the weaker parties. They don't have all the resources to check all the things. They don't have the expertise to know that whether this kind of material should be safe or not, all right? they have relied on the product saying that yours, saying that it is compliant with law. And because you say that you're holding out yourself is compliant with law, therefore, if they're not compliant with law, you are liable. Therefore, the piece of law actually is protecting the consumer rights rather than, all right, she remove any party who want to sue body, say in terms of number one, torts liability or contractual liability or under statutory sales law. Here, you change concept is the burden of proof should be the party who bring the product into EU. That's why all the party involved, if you are the material supplier, you're a manufacturer, you're exporter, you're a carrier, you're a distributor, you're a retailer, you all are liable. We sue you in one hole, in a hub. And then at the end of the day, somebody who are not in the EU, you cannot sue them. When it's empty, they're not turning up, all right? However, that who suffer loss will, how to recover the loss from another party is important. As a lawyer, only thing that how
Yes.
can you recover your loss from someone who are able to pay you is important. For a consumer, is that I sue somebody because there's a brand name there. I sue somebody because there's an online shop there. I sue a person that the retailer is sitting there. That's why he has the money to pay me back or to reimburse what I got lost. So that's it. This decision, of course, it will be a better protection way for the consumers. Of course, for better protecting the environment as well. Sustainability, environmental governance, that is the goal. It's a way they have to legislate a law, pass a law.
If we look at realities of how, let's say, for the past 25 plus years or whatever, that business has been done in China with, the concept of caveat emptor or the buyer beware has always been something which has been prominent in buying products from China. This obviously now is a paradigm shift away from that.
Totally.
Now, the question I have in my mind is suddenly we're faced with a slew of, 64 new EU regulations coming out over the next 18 months. And especially this piece of legislation as well. Is it going to be challengingly possible to enforce this in manufacturing in China? I think that's the big question. To get to the point which we made earlier, the rules and the actual convergence of all of these labeling laws, EU laws regarding product design, reliability, sustainability, transparency, and now liability all seem to be heading in one direction.
Yeah. Stop putting bad products on the EU market. Don't think you're going to be able to hide somewhere. This is not happening anymore.
Yeah, that's the way that I read it. What about your side? I mean, you're deeply involved, as I know, with manufacturing in the Guangdong. I mean, how do you feel that this is going to be taken?
So me actually say market driven. Actually say always market driven.
Market shift.
Yeah, because it's not a piece of law, but actually say, do you want the business? If yes, comply with law, that's it. Or you'll be out of the market. Survival. I think all the people that want to sell to EU, they will comply with. The people that are not able to comply with, they will be out of the market. Very simple. And then it will eliminating a lot, say, of exporter, all right, or manufacturer. They are not able to comply with this type of legislation. So they say the leaving behind manufacturer will have a higher quality. It will eliminate a lot of competitors who have a very low one, could not be compliant with the law. But I think that say China actually catching up very fast. The law say pass, and then the manufacturer they will change the mindset, and then they will adopt a new policy, and then they will going to comply with the law because they need the market.
Yeah, this will be good for the best manufacturers and very bad for all the other ones, basically.
Yeah. The quality manufacturing is important.
Right. Well, that's that's a message of hope that this will really result in better quality products on the EU market. And as you mentioned, the the fact that a lot of the lower quality manufacturers, less sophisticated manufacturers, will simply be driven out of the market. So a big shift probably coming up over the next five years, maybe a bit longer, right? So with that message of hope, a big thank you to Professor Choi, who joined us. That was very good to hear from your voice about especially the ways to actually go after Chinese manufacturers, which again, most people think is not really possible. Thanks also to Clive, who is a regular on this podcast, and thanks a lot for bringing Professor Choi on. And thanks to the listeners, and you will hear from us next week.
Thanks again for listening to this podcast brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much, much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share, because it will really help others discover us too.